Department, all right, Mosquito Control Division of Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
Dr. William Petrie and Michael Mut, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michael.
And we're going to be talking about mosquitoes, but first, I want to thank our good friends over at University Credit Union for sponsoring the show. Thank you,
Thank you.
Albert Rose and Michael Welch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so let's look
And,
at.
and thanks for having us back again, Michael.
My pleasure. All right, let's talk about mosquitoes. Now, people think mosquitoes are only around a certain part of the year, but that's not so, is it?
Oh, in Alaska, perhaps, but not in Florida. Certainly not in Miami, southern Florida. We do have a mosquito season, but it's more in terms of different types of mosquitoes from the summer to the winter months. We have mosquitoes all year round in Miami-Dade, in fact, all of southern Florida. So it's not so much the mosquitoes go away, it's different types become more prevalent at different times of year.
And for the average person, a mosquito is a mosquito is a mosquito, but that's not the case either, is it?
No, well, there's about 3,500 different kinds of them, or 4,000, depending on which book you read. So there are lots of different types of mosquitoes. So no, they're not all the same.
So tell us again about, you have your doctorate in what?
Well, evolutionary ecology, mosquito biology, mosquito reproductive biology.
Wow.
And how some mosquitoes are able to reproduce without taking blood.
It's an amazing process. And Michael Moot's been involved with the mosquitoes for quite some time. Even before he was with the department, he would go out, I'm sure, and try to catch them in his hand.
Yes, I was. I've been a bite victim most of my 50 years.
Oh, sure.
Doc.
So when I was really young, I would try to collect different animals and snakes and birds and stuff. And I started collecting bumblebees. The first one I collected in my hand.
Uh-huh.
How did that go? How did that turn
Not
out?
well at all.
Didn't end
Look,
well.
I got him.
Yeah.
All right. So down here in South Florida, the increase in the number of mosquitoes is what time during what part of the year?
Our peak season is the spring and summer, partly because of temperature rise, but also because of rainfall. But we shouldn't forget tides. I'll come back to talk about tides. But yeah, it's hotter and wetter in the summer generally, so that's an increase in the different types of mosquitoes and the numbers as well. But it's still warm enough here. It's still hot enough here. We're subtropical here in southern Florida, and it's certainly warm enough, and it's still wet enough to produce mosquitoes all year round.
So we just got over the hurricane season, like essentially.
Thankfully. we
Yes.
got over,
Yes, and
Yeah.
so, and the hurricanes stir up a lot of stuff, Michael. And so
do.
when you look at it, they stir up the oceans, the shorelines, the trees, and moving lots of that. So tell us about how that affects mosquitoes.
Well, that the other thing that's involved with hurricanes, of course, is rain. And unfortunately, the last two hurricanes that grazed or hit the area, they were largely rain events. So there was a lot of water that was dumped on the county and the surrounding area at one time. And of course, by now we all know that mosquitoes rely heavily on water in order to carry through. So, Doc, and correct me if I'm wrong, we did see a spike in the number of mosquitoes shortly thereafter, but right after the winds and the rain move through, we actually see a bit of a decrease. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Hurricanes are, with regard to mosquito populations, not as predictable as you might think. The common sense is, as Michael says, you get an increase in mosquito numbers, mainly because of rainfall. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes the opposite happens. It can possibly get blown right through. Depends on the actual storm, where it's coming from and how long it lasts.
So we know lots of people use pesticides. They put it in their hands and their skin, and we also know that there are a lot of diseases not connected to mosquitoes that become penicillin resistant. Does that happen in pesticides with mosquitoes?
Yes, unfortunately, in insects generally, resistance to pesticides or whatever chemical you're trying to control them with in insects and in mosquitoes, for us, that's a real problem. It's a real problem throughout the world, Michael. Resistance to the chemicals, the products that people use, even the safest chemicals that we have, mosquitoes are becoming resistant to many of these products, unfortunately.
And we know that mosquitoes and cockroaches and all these other insects that have lasted millions and millions of years, they're very adaptable. They're able to change.
Hundreds of millions of
hundreds
years.
of millions of years. So, and Michael, you have in front of you over there to your right.
Mosquito cam.
Let's see.
Can
Okay,
we get a
mosquito
close up
cam.
now?
And so, folks, this is the real deal. Right here on the table over community newspapers, we have a little, oh my goodness. They look like tadpoles, but they're not.
Right. No, no. What we're seeing now on camera are mosquito larvae. And these are samples that are collected throughout the community, and they come back to our laboratory very much like this, enclosed in bags. And what we do then is we take great pains to identify them. So we study them under a microscope, and we're able to determine what types they are, and we're able to log where we captured them. So that gives us a pretty good idea of which mosquitoes are where in our county.
So yeah, there's 3 different bags. Are there the same, or do you think there's 3 different? Are there different types in each one, or have you tested those yet?
There could be a number of different species within each bag. And no, we haven't tested, we haven't ID'd them yet. We asked essentially for a stay in their execution, if you will, Michael. We had our wonderful laboratory team hold off on doing what it is they do to them so we can bring them in here today.
And so on these particular ones, how did you get them? What was the process used to?
So on a daily basis, our inspectors go out, and yeah, Michael, if you do that again, I can see. So the bag in the middle, sorry, Michael, the bag in the middle, they're relatively easy to identify. I mean, even for me with my eyesight from here, because it has a long siphon, which is essentially a snorkel that it uses to breathe at what you would think is the tail end. So they're actually upside down, breathing from the tail end at the surface of the water. And on the bag to my left, Michael, if you want to thump that one again.
This one here?
There's at least one pupa. No, the other bag.
Oh, this one over
Sorry,
here.
there's at least one pupa I saw bobbing up and down. So
Yeah, it's a comma-shaped little
the larva
bugger.
is the equivalent of a caterpillar, if you like. And the pupa, which is an odd shaped like a comma, as Michael said, it's essentially like a chrysalis then in a butterfly. It's the stage going from the larval stage, the immature stage which feeds. It's the little stage between that and the adult. So in that little comma-shaped odd thing, which doesn't feed, let's see if we can see one.
I think I might have stirred it up a little too much. Stir it up, huh?
Inside that,
Well, I think he's... No, that
let's
wasn't
see
it.
in a sec. So within 18 to 24 hours, all the tissues of the larval stage break down inside there and reform into the adult mosquito, much like a butterfly, although people tend to think the butterfly is much prettier, more beautiful than...
Both pollinators, right?
yeah,
Mosquitoes and butterflies.
Yeah.
So tell us about the traps that you have out throughout the county.
We have over 300 traps now. This particular, there are lots of different mosquito traps, quite a few different types anyway. Some work better than others, some work during the day, some work at night with a light. Or we use a particular type of trap. It's more of a modern one that's been developed over recent years, particularly for catching a mosquito called Aedes aegypti, the Zika mosquito, the dengue mosquito.
So the trap is made with the specific intention in mind to get,
Well, not
or did that just
not
happen?
only, but it's a trap that works during the day, and that particular mosquito is a daytime active mosquito. Trap essentially attracts the mosquitoes. Our traps, we use carbon
lures
dioxide.
them.
We use a dry ice. So it gives off carbon dioxide, which is meant to be like your breath. The mosquito senses it and is attracted to the trap. The trap has a fan, which then sucks them down.
And how big is that trap?
The trap's only about this big, this particular one.
And Michael, how many, more or less, if you got some out in Homestead or South Miami, how many typically on an average day might be captured? And do you go to those weekly or daily?
We service them weekly, and you can get anywhere from nothing, from a skunk to, skunk meaning 0, to tens of thousands of mosquitoes
In there.
captured in one particular trap. Yeah.
So there's a little
happened before.
bag about this size.
Right. And it's quite a sight when you see them in the thousands brought back like that.
And so they take the trap and they take the whole trap off, or do they?
Oh, no, it's a catch bag that's attached to the bottom of the fan.
Oh, okay.
So it's a one-way ticket, so shall we say, to our headquarters in Doral.
Is this the bag? Are they bags like this?
No, no.
No.
These are sample bags that would capture the mosquitoes in the larval stage. What Dr. Petrie is referring to, and what we're talking about with a 320 or so number, those are to capture adult mosquitoes.
And so they take the bag off, put another bag on, they're on their way.
Right. They reset the
Yeah.
battery because they're battery driven, so the battery has a certain a limited shelf life. So they reset the trap, and then they bring the mosquito sample bag with these mosquitoes live. They're live. They're on their way back to the laboratory.
So we sample both larvae and adults. These are done on a daily basis by our
Right.
inspectors going around looking for the adult trapping is a weekly thing. You're sampling the population is what you're trying to do.
So I used to collect snakes and iguanas and
Yeah.
catch them. And so occasionally the snakes and iguanas would get out. And I wonder, how often do the mosquitoes escape in the laboratory?
Never. They never, ever.
Because you
get
got
out,
it down
Michael.
pat.
Absolutely.
And so
I say that with tongue in cheek because it occasionally one or two will
I've
escape.
met some of the young people that are the techs. Is that what they're called?
Yes.
And
Oh, you met a biologist
Yes,
and a lab
biologist,
tech.
yes.
Yes.
Two actually.
Yes.
And so they brought with them a mosquito pinned on
Uh-huh.
styrofoam, which
Yes.
is extraordinary to do that.
Yeah, I think we brought
Yeah.
Yadira in, and we brought Monica also.
Yeah, and Joanna.
Yeah, Joanna's been here before.
So, and sometimes people don't understand, myself included, how some of the implications of being bitten by different types of mosquitoes. Why don't you tell us some of the things that are inconsequential and some of the ones that could be hazardous?
Most mosquitoes are not dangerous to humans in that sense. Irritating, yes, and some mosquitoes, as I say, bite during the day. Some mosquitoes like to bite you late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning when you're lying in bed. That's particularly irritating.
Yeah, those aren't the ones that are
the-
mosquito vectors, or disease vectors.
There are a few, and I must say that it's very few, but there are some which carry viruses, and then also there's malaria. The viruses are the real concern. In Florida and throughout the United States, West Nile virus is endemic. It's here established in the U.S. since 1999.
Is that connected to horses? Which was there something, one of the
The Eastern
Equine
encephalitis.
encephalitis
Okay.
is connected to horses. Well, there are a number of equine encephalitis, horse viruses, which can spill over to humans. Not very often. That's quite rare. Our biggest concerns in those cases would be dengue fever. Zika is pretty much gone, but there is concern that it could be a resurgence. West Nile viruses are our other main disease concern. So those are our disease concerns that we watch for.
Let's talk about the people that are working on the farms and homestead and Redlands, vegetables or tree farms. Tell us about the number of mosquitoes there compared to typical, urban setting.
That's a good question because it might be counterintuitive, Michael. There are some areas, some locations where you would suspect to have not very many mosquitoes, and that can be wrong sometimes because the dengue mosquito, this Aedes aegypti, this notorious one, it breeds profusely around your yard, people's yards, people's properties, businesses. That's what it's become adapted to do. So even in an area you may think is not particularly mosquito prone, you might find more than you think, especially there's lots of plants and vegetation around.
Yeah, and I think, Michael, you're referring to the Redlands would be the areas that are close to the Everglades, Doc. So maybe that's what he's getting at. Sometimes
yeah.
these areas are prone to really mass hatchings and mass emergence of mosquitoes.
So what happens there, and it's very, very different, and before we knew a great deal about mosquito biology, this caused a lot of confusion. The areas that you're talking about, you can typically you can go for long periods of time with no mosquitoes, or virtually none. You won't notice them, none. And then all of a sudden, bang, one day you'll get millions, hundreds of millions.
The famed swarm that you tell us about.
The
told us.
Swarm of mosquitoes can come up out of the mangrove swamps, and they've actually been recorded in Florida, actually, many years ago, as traveling as much as 30 miles, which is highly unusual. But this is because this mosquito, the reason they occur in such astronomical numbers all of a sudden is because they have a very different strategy from the ones breeding in your yard. The ones breeding in your yard are breeding all the time, ticking over, small numbers relatively. The other ones we're talking about that breed in, let's say, the Everglades or associated vegetation, those ones, the eggs are lying in the swamp. The eggs are lying dormant. And they can lie there for years, months and years.
In soft and on the ground.
In the mud, in the
In
peat,
mud, okay.
in grass.
Can you switch to the mosquito cam a second? I'd like to share.
And so
little
you get a
image.
buildup of these eggs, Michael.
And those are eggs in there.
Those little tiny specks that
Yeah.
you see.
Yeah,
Those are
okay.
eggs.
Those are mosquito eggs.
Could you make those hatch?
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
this moment, but you could. And how long have they been dormant like that?
Well,
More or less.
these were. Looks like in December is when we harvested these.
Yeah, these are not very old.
Right, but what we'll do is we will breed these in captivity. We will compel them to hatch. We'll breed them, and these are some of the ones that we use to test our pesticide resistance on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe these in particular we're going to be sharing with our partners at the Centers for Disease Control. Doc, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. These are
Yeah.
actually going to be sent away to get tested for insecticide resistance. We also send mosquitoes away for testing for presence of the virus or any virus.
So the hundreds of
Hey,
thousands.
there's the pupa, Doc, that you were referring to.
Oh, there
before.
it is.
The one over here, that little thing there.
So it bounces up and down.
Yeah.
So,
it's
and
more
how
of a
old?
comma.
How old are these critters in there?
These are just less than a week old.
Yeah.
And if they were allowed to continue to, when would they be flying around?
That pupa will emerge
The next day or two.
tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah.
And how long do they live?
That's a very good question. You mean the adult mosquitoes?
Yes.
That's a very good question, Michael.
Okay.
You can get a PhD out of that.
Okay.
Males don't live very long.
I'm talking about mosquitoes, not us.
Male mosquitoes don't live very
It
long.
kind of works the same way throughout the animal kingdom. Right?
Male mosquitoes don't live, typically don't live very long. Female mosquitoes live 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending.
So nature's made it so they're reproducing all the time in tens of millions to keep the species going.
Well, one female mosquito with a blood meal, with a full blood meal, that's what she's using to make her eggs. She can make anywhere from 100, 150 eggs, even 200 eggs with one batch. And if she can have another cycle after that, then
And each of those, the ones that hatch at the same process, a couple of weeks later, they're grown
7 to 10 days later.
and doing the same process.
Right.
yes.
Right.
And they must, what food must they have to survive?
So all mosquitoes, males and females, just like butterflies, bees, and other insects, they feed on nectar from flowers, which people don't think of for mosquitoes. Typically, butterflies are nice and pretty, so it's okay for them. Mosquitoes use the nectar for energy. They don't grow. They don't have any growth. They've done all their growing in the larval stage, so they don't need food to grow, but they need food for energy, for flight. So what they eat is sugar, it's nectar.
And the reason they suck blood out of animals and people is so that what happens.
Just to make eggs.
To take the protein out of the blood in
Yeah.
order to.
So
create
they
the
could
eggs.
live their lifespan without ever getting blood.
Yeah, the female may not get blood. She may never, if she doesn't get a blood meal, she's not going to.
Yeah, and the male can't even get a blood meal, so he will never.
So they
taste
can
blood.
live without laying eggs.
Yes, they can live. You mean the female
Yes,
mosquito?
yeah.
She can live without reproducing. Obviously, that's not what she intends to do. One of the things that I studied, which is interesting about the swamp mosquito, I call it the Everglades mosquito, mangrove swamps, those types of mosquitoes. Unusually, very unusually, they can actually produce some eggs without blood. A very small number of eggs without blood. And the thinking is that this allows them to tide over, this allows them to live in environments where there may not be easy access to a blood meal.
So let's talk about people that have ponds in their yards, all right?
Uh-huh.
With the little fish in there. So let's talk about that. What about mosquitoes? How does that whole process work?
Well, if they have fish in them, it's not going to be very good for mosquitoes because the mosquito larvae They are very attractive to fish. It's almost like if you think of fishing and lures and how worms work, you know that they're a delicacy for certain species of fish. However, if it's just a decorative pond, if you don't take pains to introduce the larvicide BTI, you could be generating a mosquito factory there.
But the mosquitoes, with ponds, they don't lay it in the water. Do they lay it on the lip of there, or
depending on the species, they would lay a raft of eggs on the water, which then would hatch directly into the water, and that's sort of what that looks like there. But if it is a different type of mosquito, they would lay the eggs close to the water, not necessarily on it, but just kind of like on the surface or near the surface of the water, so that they would hatch if there was a good amount of rainfall or irrigation water that would dampen the eggs.
It's great to have your public information officers know so much about the mosquito biology.
And
I learned from the best.
We have seen so often fish sort of like jump out of the water and grab flying critters, you know, when they're close, which is pretty amazing, especially in slow motion.
Yep.
So, so if mosquitoes are flying over like in a lake, and the bass or whatever sees it, and can they see it flying? The fish.
The fish will take mosquitoes, but typically the mosquito's too small. There's not enough. Well, I suspect that there's not enough protein in one effort for the fish. Mayflies, as you may have seen them emerge, a bit bigger, a bit more
robust,
a bit more robust, a bit more substantial,
more caloric
for a fish.
Higher caloric intake.
So over the years, we've tried all sorts of mosquito controls at our office, including the zapper. Right. Unfortunately, when I would hear snap, 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 my question, were those mosquitoes or were those larger critters?
Probably larger. The
Moths.
the problem with those is that they're not selective.
Right.
No.
And so that's not a good thing to do because
Not especially, no.
Yeah.
One thing Dr. Petrie has really just drilled into me and what I communicate to the public is that the best way to eliminate the mosquito is through source reduction. And that's really the biggest reason why I brought the mosquito samples is to give people an idea what they look like. And so I think if you see anything that looks like this, and if we could switch to the mosquito cam just for a second here. If you see anything that looks like this in your yard, it's best to just eliminate them and get rid of them.
Andres? Okay.
Mosquito cam. Go to mosquito cam. So if you see any of these type of creatures wiggling around in your yard, it's best to just get rid of them. Dump out the water. And that's part of the half of the big piece of our advice, our campaign, the drain and cover, drain standing water.
So sometimes people might get confused with a tadpole and these guys.
Right.
The big difference is what?
The tadpoles are much bigger. And they're more, I guess they look more of like a dot. They have a rounder shape to them. You know, and they definitely look more like fish in the way that they swim and they move. Here, this is, you guys can see this is more of a skittish type of movement. You know, especially over here, the pupae on this side here. That's a mosquito pupae, and you can see it's sort of like a comma. You can see how he's kind of batting around. Tadpoles definitely don't move like that. Tadpoles move more like fish.
So let's talk about in the average yard, all right? There's grass and maybe some bushes in the people's yard. Where might these critters be hiding?
So one particular type of mosquito, the one that we don't like, will be breeding in artificial containers, not natural containers. Food bowls, any garbage left lying around.
Dog bowl.
The pet
Tarps,
bowls,
you know, car tarps.
tarpaulins. Tarpaulins are surprisingly bad. The worst thing of all is tires, discarded tires. They get water inside. We've gone over this before, Michael, but it bears repeating. They get water inside, which is almost impossible to get out. Try it and see.
When we used to go snake hunting, we were always careful
Right.
because we knew there were some critters of some sort
They
in
love
there.
to live in snakes. It's warm in there. It's dark, and also it would appear to be that mosquito eggs stick particularly well to the inside of tires. So tires, we've found them, and you can find them in old jet skis, bicycle, anything that's lying around.
And including
toys, lawn
if you
toys.
have plants and pots with a dish underneath.
Absolutely.
That's
A
a
little
big
overflow dish, right?
Yes.
They love that. Bromeliads.
Absolutely.
That's another really good mosquito breeding
Bromeliads.
source.
So what
Indeed.
should people do who have bromeliads? What should they do?
Well, what we like to say is if you treat them with larvicide, also they sell the larvicide BTI in granular form. You can find them at any hardware store. You could keyword search on Google and find it. They're called mosquito bits commercially. So if you sprinkle them into each tank of the bromeliad and along the sides of their leaves, that usually takes care of the problem for 2 or 3 weeks because it's a slow dissolve, and then this larvicide gets into the standing water within the plant, and it kills the mosquito before they're able to fly. So again, it's more of a preventive, proactive sort of approach as opposed to waiting until they're already
Yeah.
emerged and they're flying around and biting you.
Preventative. They're also inexpensive,
Right.
and they're also extremely safe. That particular pesticide.
So if somebody calls up and says, "Listen, we got a lot of mosquitoes around here," and they give the address, do you then go and look to the traps that are there and say, "Well, we think that we do because"?
Well, the first thing we do is an inspection. Well, Michael, do you want to take that from 311?
Sure. If you if let's say you go out, and you're not able to enjoy your porch or your backyard right now, the weather's really nice, so people tend to spend a little bit more time outside. If you're getting swarmed or attacked by mosquitoes, the best thing to do is to call 311. That's our county call center, our sort of a customer service line, and so there's a number of county services that are available, including mosquito inspection. So you can request an inspection. You can tell the 311 operator, hey, I'm having an issue with mosquitoes. They take down some simple details about where you live and where the problem is occurring, and where they're able to send somebody out within a day or two. Or conversely, you can use our website, miamidade.gov/mosquito. If you go there, again, there's a tab that you can request a mosquito inspection, and there's a number of mobile apps that are available that provide access to county services. The one I'd like to recommend the most is a solid waste app, the Miami-Dade Solid Waste app. You can download that one onto your Android or your iPhone. And again, it's very simple to request our services.
So if somebody's calling up from a neighborhood, you get the call and you go, "Gee, this is the fourth one in the neighborhood," right? And then you go, "I guess there's a real problem." Right?
Oh, we'll
in
know,
the neighborhood.
Right. We can see.
You would know from that, yeah. So the first thing we do is an inspection. Send someone out to do an inspection, which is usually done the same day or the next day. And then depending upon what the inspector finds, if they find any mosquitoes flying around, that's one thing. They'll look for larvae and larvicide. If they're getting quite a few calls, and if the inspector finds, oh yeah, there's quite a bit of biting going on here, and in that area, that could well be a situation where there's been a mosquito emergence from the Everglades, from local mangrove, or even from pasture lands, fields. People tend to forget that pasture lands, fields with cows, can produce
Yes.
lots and lots of mosquitoes.
And so let's say you determine there are a lot of mosquitoes out there. What does the county do?
But if the inspector finds adult mosquitoes flying around during his or her inspection, they will go ahead and do a spray, a backpack spray.
That they
initially.
may have with them.
Yes, which
Yeah,
we-
they all-
which
they
they
all
all
have it.
have with them. They will not spray if they don't find mosquitoes flying around. They will not.
Or if it's too windy. That's
Or
that's
if it's too
sometimes,
windy.
if it's rainy.
So when they spray, they're not spraying in the air.
Yeah,
Oh, they're
actually,
spraying
they are,
in the
but
air.
it's localized. It's
Yeah.
a very focused,
Yeah.
very targeted treatment. So it'll essentially eliminate the mosquitoes there at the property.
But what we'll do is schedule a truck-mounted spraying operation for that area. That would be scheduled in the office for.
Can we chase it like we used to do with the ice cream trucks?
You could
so,
technically if you like.
so if a truck
to do
goes out when you need a big enough area, right?
Yeah.
Truck goes out. Typically, is there a particular time of the day that they go out?
Yeah, they'll be spraying. They'll be applying the insecticide between 1 and 5 in the morning.
They go out. They go to the neighborhood, and the spray goes out the top or the back, and it goes. How high up do the droplets go?
Well, if you're spraying for adult mosquitoes, conventional spraying to kill the mosquitoes that are out there, the spray doesn't go very high. You don't want it going very high, 20 feet up in the air at the most. There's another operation that we do, which is larviciding, attacking these larvae. That operation uses a different product, and it shoots the product 100 feet up in the air, so that it can get over obstacles like tree lines and fences and buildings when you can't get access to the breeding sites.
So people want to know: is that dangerous to my health?
Absolutely not. And one of the very good stories about pesticides and mosquito control, because most of the stories are bad. It's all this resistance. But one of the products is called BTI that Michael mentioned.
Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis.
There you go. Look at that.
Took
See?
me years to
See?
master that. Yeah, I bungled that I mangled that
Very
pretty
good.
well.
And it's a naturally occurring bacterium which produces a toxin which is lethal to mosquito larvae.
Only
And
mosquito larvae.
We have 2 minutes left.
it doesn't kill anything else apart from black fly larvae. So it's actually non-toxic to all other insects and birds and mammals in our cells.
So, Michael, real quickly, what should people do now? All right, in their yards, if they have a problem, what should they do?
Well, remember, folks, it's the winter, but mosquitoes don't fly south. They don't disappear this time of year, so they're out there. They're out and about. So what you should do is wear long sleeve clothing, or you can essentially any exposed skin that you're going to be having, treat it with some spray with a repellent that's we like to say EPA registered, but that's technical jargon. If anything that has DEET or picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or IR 3535, any repellent that has that, use that. Apply it liberally. If you're trying to protect infants, maybe that are aged 3 months or younger, we recommend using a netting on the crib or over the stroller. It's best not to apply repellent to young babies and young skin like that. But protect your skin, and like we said before, drain standing water. Eliminate anything you find that may hold water.
And so the mantra of the mosquito control department is what? Drain and
Cover.
Drain and cover. So at the end of the day, folks, they can dial 311. They go to Miami-Dade.gov, mosquito control. They can find out all the things. There's no extra charge. People come out. They'll take a look-see.
Right, we
and
won't
they'll
send
try
you a
to take
bill. There will not be an
Correct.
invoice. No.
We like that. Dr. Petrie, thank you so
Michael,
much.
thank you
Merry
very
Christmas
much.
to you. Happy
Merry
holidays,
Christmas
sir.
to you,
Same
Michael.
to you.
Folks, thanks for joining us, and happy holidays to you, and have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you,
Bye now.
Andres.